You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.
Now I'll introduce the first session of the day. The Honorable Hester M. Peirce will share an update with us on today's regulatory landscape. Well, I'm sorry Andrei Bolkovic, our CEO, is unable to join us as planned. I'm excited to moderate this discussion with Commissioner Peirce, who has served as commissioner since 2018 and has been a steady hand and thoughtful voice in the regulatory policy area. She spent time earlier in her career on staff at the SEC, the Senate Banking Committee, and in private practice, so she brings a well-rounded perspective to her role. She is currently leading the SEC's Crypto Task Force, which is charting a practical approach to the regulation of crypto assets. So please welcome the Honorable Hester Peirce. You want me to sit here, right? How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good to see you.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I think the biggest question that everyone's waiting to hear is if you're a golfer or not.
I am not a golfer. I tried golfing one time. I went to the driving range, and I realized this is not my sport. So
okay.
No, I'm not.
You won't be making it out to the...
I will not.
Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it. I know at OCC we've met many times at the Commission in D.C., and we were fortunate enough to have you come to the company and speak to our employees. Very well received, and appreciated your perspective and insight. I think where I wanted to start today is what I had just talked about with the volatility, the market volumes, all of the the throughput, whether front office, middle office, back office, and the operational professionals and everything that made this highly volatile intraday volatility, all the volume work smoothly. And from your perspective, at your position at the Commission, how has that gone? Have you received good reports, and also are there things that we can do as an industry that you may be wanting us to tackle or deal with?
Yeah, and before I start, I should say that my views are my own views as a commissioner, not necessarily those of the SEC or my fellow commissioners. But I do think that we all have been really pleased to see that even with the volatility and volume, the markets have worked very well, and I think it's a testament to the work that the industry has put in over recent years. And so, I guess it's just a reminder that it's always good to be prepared for the unexpected. And so continuing to make those investments in technology and personnel and training, I think that all pays off. And I think we've seen that.
Okay, great. Let's move into, in the options industry right now, the retail investors are really taking an active role with short-dated options, zero DTE, other things. When you consider these trends, what do you see as positives of this increase in retail to the market?
I think the positives, certainly from retail's own perspective, is it does give them the opportunity to use these tools to benefit themselves, their own trading strategies. It allows them to protect themselves in ways that they wouldn't if they didn't use these products. So I think that part is positive. And I think it's always good to have markets that you have more participants in. So I think that's all good. Retail investors should be entering eyes wide open, and I think that's an important reminder too, to keep the education component going, make sure that people know the tools that they're using. I think that serves everyone better if retail is aware of what the tools are for and how they can use them But I think in general, the trend is good. And it suggests, too, that the markets are serving them well. I mean, I think, again, we have great market structure, great markets on the equity side, but also on the option side.
Do you think there's anything we can do further to, increase that or take care of any issues that may have come to the Commission's attention with retail investors and their ability to understand the products even further?
Well, I mean, I think it's going to be an ongoing thing to try to keep the education going and trying to take advantage of new tools that we have to make that education stick and to help people figure out how to use these products wisely. I think that's just a continuing job. But in general, I think I think it's again a positive market for retail investors. I'm a big believer that people should be able to make decisions for themselves. So I'm not a very paternalistic regulator or maternalistic regulator. I think that as long as people have the information to decide, yes, this is for me, or no, this is not for me, and you all are working to help them get that base knowledge that they need, I think that's positive.
Great. Well, we know Chairman Atkins just arrived at the SEC.
He sends his greetings to everyone, by the way.
You both have worked together many years. What's on the agenda, options or not options, that you've talked about, and what do you think are priorities in the next year or two that we should be aware of?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of options, no pun intended, for what he could spend his time on, and I think given that he's about 2 weeks into the job, we can't expect him to have a fully baked agenda, but there certainly are things that I think we all need to be thinking about. Some are sort of hangovers from what happened during the last 4 years. Part of it is figuring out which of the proposals that are out there we want to move forward with or not. And then I think part of it is also addressing some areas where we didn't spend time that we should have spent time on. Capital formation, it's one prong of our mission, and I think we haven't spent as much time on thinking about a bunch of aspects of that. So whether it's small businesses figuring out better ways for them to access capital, even though we all have been thinking about this for a long time, there are, I think, some fixes that we can make, whether it's changing the rules around crowdfunding, Regulation A, whether it's creating a micro-offering exemption. Those are some things on the very small side, but then also thinking about why companies aren't going public. I think we all know that there are a lot of companies, large companies, that are deciding either to wait longer or to just never go public, and what is behind that. I don't think there's an easy one answer to that, but I think we certainly can do something on the SEC side, because I think regulation does play a role in why companies don't want to go public. So trying to figure out how to scale requirements so that companies can work their way into the full panoply of requirements. And then trying to make sure that our SEC disclosure rules are geared toward meeting the information needs of investors, not of random third parties who have come upon the SEC disclosure regime and decided it's a good way to get companies to talk about whatever the hottest and most controversial social and political issues of the day are. That's just not an appropriate function for SEC disclosures. And so I think walking back from some of that. So that's on that side. I mean, every chairman comes in and is going to look at market structure issues. Equity market structure got a lot of attention during the last two administrations, but there are still some areas that I think could get attention. Chairman Atkins was here as a commissioner when Reg NMS was adopted, and he had some pretty sharp words about it at the time. I think some of what he said in his dissent actually has come to pass, and so looking at things like the order protection rule on the equity side, I think all of you probably are aware that the SEC, the commission, spends a lot less time focused on options markets issues as compared to equity markets issues. Given the importance of those markets, I'm not sure that that's a proper balance, and so I'd love to see us spend some more time thinking about options markets issues. Now, I don't know that means we jump right in with a solution, because you should identify a problem before you identify solutions. It's good general practice. So maybe starting with something like a roundtable where we could identify issues and then go from there and figuring out whether there are regulatory solutions to those issues or whether the market is solving any problems that we see.
Can you tell us a little bit about his leadership style or management style since you've worked together and what we can expect?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's someone who really enjoys both the markets and you know, he and I share a belief that the capital markets are one of the things that makes the American economy as strong as it is. But he also has a real interest in talking to market participants, and he enjoys people. So I think he'll be someone who wants to hear from you, whose door is always open. He is not someone who comes with all of the solutions baked out in his head. He wants to get that it should be a collaborative process involving both people on the SEC staff as well as people outside. He, you know, was a fantastic boss, and I think that will be very positive for the agency. It's a time of a lot of change in Washington D.C., as you know, and so having someone who's been at the agency and also who has an open and collaborative leadership style, I think, will be quite helpful.
And with the agency, I know we've read in the press a little bit about, you know, the DOGE cuts and other things. Is there any concern with you know, people leaving, or do you feel that there's enough, you know, knowledge and experience there that you know, with the changes?
Well, some people did take the fork in the road and decided to leave that way. We had a voluntary program, and others did decide to take that. The SEC is an agency that has a lot of expertise. Some of it did walk out the door with those programs, but we have a deep bench. I think that we have a lot of people who are willing to step up and fill the gaps that we have, and we have, you know, just really people who are committed to investor protection and market function. And so I think we will do the work with the people that we have, and so I'm quite confident that we can figure out how to move people as we need to, and we can keep doing the job that we have to do.
And one of the things I know you're a big proponent and leader in the crypto space, managing the crypto task force. Can you tell us a little bit about that, the goals, and what you've been hearing, and what you plan to do there?
Yeah, so Acting Chairman Ueda, when he was acting, he set up the crypto task force, and the goal of the task force is really to rethink the approach that we've taken to crypto over the last several years. That approach has been using enforcement to write regulatory policy, and that's never a good way to write regulatory policy. I always underscore the fact that we're a regulatory agency with an enforcement arm, and the enforcement division has a role to play, but its role should not be spelling out policy in the first place. So the first step of what we needed to do as a task force is really pull back from that and say, okay, let's put some of those resources that we were spending on thinking about bringing enforcement actions into the hard work up front of thinking through these regulatory issues, right? And one of those issues is to just say some of this crypto activity really is not SEC activity. You know, it's pretty typical for regulators to try to grab as much jurisdiction as they can, but I think from a very practical perspective, the capital markets, the securities markets are so important, and Congress has given us the authority over those markets. It's really irresponsible of us to try to say, oh, and we want to regulate this thing and this thing and this thing. Let's just focus on the stuff we have. So I think part of what the task force has already started to do is to work with staff in the agency to say some of these things really aren't in our space. And then when we decide that something is within our space and we talk to people, we tell people that, we also invite people to come in and work with us to figure out, okay, do we need to make any adjustments to the rules? If so, what do those adjustments look like? And then laying the term for rulemaking where that's necessary, and working with Congress and other agencies as Congress thinks about the longer-term legislative framework around the crypto industry. So I think it's been really encouraging so far. I've put out a request for comment with lots of questions. I've gotten a lot of really good feedback. And as people who are not interested in escaping SEC jurisdiction, but in working within SEC jurisdiction to figure out how the technology underlying crypto assets or crypto assets themselves will be integrated into the traditional financial markets. There's definitely space too for crypto native firms, but I think a lot of more traditional market participants are coming in and saying, hey, we have an interest in this, or our clients have an interest in this.
On the crypto side, with the legislation that's pending in Congress right now, anything in there that will affect this jurisdiction, or are there highlights that you're looking forward to coming out of that legislation?
I think all of us are looking forward to having a framework that we can point to and more easily figure out whether something's, this question of whether something's a security or not has really been, it's been hard for a lot of people. It's been hard for the agency itself. We haven't been able to provide people a clear answer, and it's very frustrating for people on the outside who are trying to figure out, are they subject to SEC rules or not? So I think the legislation will provide some clarity there. We can provide some clarity already there, and we're trying to do that now. But I think also, just if you're going to have a regulator of the crypto spot markets, it's helpful for Congress to identify clearly who that regulator is. In the drafts that we've seen, it's the CFTC. What I would like to get on the SEC side is, to the extent entities that we regulate want to have pairs trading, for example, with a crypto asset and a security, it would be I think that already they can do that transaction, but it would be helpful if we got explicit regulatory authority over the crypto side of that transaction. And I think the goal, in my mind, of trying to have a streamlined regulatory framework so that you don't necessarily have to register with the CFTC and the NFA, but you can focus on being registered with the SEC and perhaps FINRA. So that's one of the things I'm thinking about. I know Congress is working through some really difficult issues, so we'll see how all this comes out, but we're trying to provide them some technical assistance and think 10 years down the road, what does this system actually look like when it's in place? And they've been really wonderful to work with.
Great. So you've been a leader over the years in the effort to ensure CFTC, SEC work well together, try to align thought as much as you can. Are you optimistic about the agencies working together with the new leadership in place?
Yeah, I'm very optimistic. Brian Quintens, who's the nominee for chairman of the CFTC, is someone that I worked with on those issues around SEC, CFTC coordination in the swaps and security-based swaps markets. So having him back as chairman, I think, will be really helpful. He's got a great relationship with Chairman Atkins as well. And then the other commissioners there, we have a great relationship. I did an event last week with Commissioner Mersinger over at the CFTC. So I think, given that we're in a mode now where neither of the agencies is trying to say this has to all be ours, it's a much easier way to work together. As you all know, I'm sure there are areas over the years where the SEC and CFTC's jurisdictions meet and we don't always agree on who has jurisdiction over what. So there's always progress we can make on that front. But I'm looking forward to this era with the chairman that we have.
And there was also this never-ending discussion about combo of CFTC, SEC. Do you think that that's on anyone's agenda?
Oh, that's always on someone's agenda, but it's definitely above my pay grade, so I will not comment on that.
Okay. So in terms of like capital liquidity, there's a lot of cross, with the Fed and SEC, CFTC, and especially close to OCC's heart, margin requirements, liquidity. Where do you see everything working together, try to find more efficiencies? I know we're working closely with DTCC to do that. What are your thoughts there and what can be done?
Yeah, I'm always open to suggestions about how we can safely get margin efficiencies. And I think the capital constraints that often come from the banking side of the regulatory house definitely have an effect on who's participating in the markets and how actively they're participating. And so doing whatever we can do on that side, I certainly want to be helpful. I think on the crypto side, we saw this very dramatically with SAB 121, where that was an SEC staff bulletin that basically made it very capital intensive for anyone to be involved in the crypto space. And so one of the first things that happened under Acting Chairman Ueda was for that to go away. And so just seeing the effect of something like that, it's just a good reminder of how our rules can really play a role in defining what the marketplace looks like. So always welcome ideas on where we should be prioritizing work in those areas.
So I know every incoming administration takes a look at policy and making sure that they're in alignment with the change. With the new administration, there are some executive orders that talk a lot about rescinding regulation, and then also this concept of policy has to go to the White House before it becomes in practice or law. So can you explain a little bit what the executive order does, and practically speaking, how we should look at that?
Yeah, I think one of the things that has been talked about for a long time in Washington is that some regulators' economic analysis does not go through the office at OMB, at the Office of Management and Budget. There's this tiny office called OIRA, which is the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs. I think that's what it stands for. And that office is kind of the keeper of all things economic analysis. And so for many, many years, people have been suggesting that all agencies' rulemakings go through that office. These are people who know economic analysis very well. They've written the guidance that's kind of the gold standard of that analysis. And so now that's something that President Trump has put in place, which is that our rules will go through that. So we at the SEC have a long, tortured history with economic analysis, where we actually do a lot more economic analysis than a lot of the other independent financial regulators. So I think we're starting with our, ahead of the game. We had many, many years ago now, I guess it's 15, 20 years ago, we had some unfortunate interactions with courts in which they didn't think our economic analysis was up to snuff. And so our response to that was to actually change our Office of Economic Analysis into a division of economic analysis. And that division is now chock full of economists, which is great. It's something we didn't have enough of before. And so they've been working, for all those years on really making our economic analyses better. And so I think having the analysis run through this outside office at OMB will be helpful, just to get this kind of expert consultant's view. There's some really tricky things when you're doing economic analysis, and I think it'll be helpful to have that input. It is more complicated with a commission. We are a commission when we're at full strength of 5 people, and if you look inside how that process of how rules are made, there are often negotiations that are happening right up until the last minute. And so figuring out how to run that through OIRA is going to be a little bit mechanically difficult, but I think we can certainly work on that, and I think we can get some good help on getting economic analysis in better shape. And I think one reminder of the importance of economic analysis is that during the last 4 years, there was a lot coming out of the SEC, kind of fast and furious, and there were sometimes rule proposals that were coming out that overlapped with one another, or maybe contradicted one another, and it was really hard for people to figure out what is the baseline even that the SEC should be working off, and how are all of those different rules going to interact with each other. And so I do hope that going forward we can do a better job at just really telling people, here's the problem we're trying to solve, here's the set of solutions that we looked at to solve it, here's the one that we're leaning toward adopting, here are the assumptions and the data that we use to come to the conclusion around the costs and benefits. Now please give us your feedback, and we're going to give you a long enough time to do it. I hope that's where we can come out.
Thank you. Changing gears now, I believe it's fair to say we're all looking at artificial intelligence. OCC just brought in a large language model. We're doing some work there. What are your views? I know that you spoke recently on for us not to be influenced by artificial fears. I'd like to expand on that a little bit, and then also talk about how, especially as a regulated agency, how we should be. There's lines that we should not cross in terms of what we're implementing and how we're implementing it.
Yeah, I mean, AI isn't new to the financial industry, but as you point out, the rate of innovation in that space and large language models and seeing the effects very concretely now in our daily lives, it really does bring it more to the forefront. I'm really optimistic about what AI can do in terms of making financial firms more efficient at what they do. I think it will make it easier for more people to get access to financial services because it'll be cheaper. And so that's positive, and I don't want to do anything to constrain that. We saw a few years ago, the SEC put out a rule proposal that would have made it really hard for firms to use all kinds of technology, including artificial intelligence. So I hope that we don't do something like that. And so I think the first thing I'd say is, to the extent that we see a problem, let's figure out how to tackle it, but let's not just assume that there are problems with AI because it seems big and scary. So really, one is just let us as regulators try to stay on top of what's going on in the market, try to keep our ear to the ground. If we do think there are going to be issues, let's have a conversation with people in the industry and with people skeptics and advocates at the same time, and let's come to a conclusion about what a good regulatory solution would be. I think we do need to use the technology ourselves. There are ways that, we talked about the fact that we've lost some employees, and I think there are areas in which artificial intelligence is a very natural tool for the SEC to use as a regulator to make us more efficient. We have to do it carefully. I don't want to become a giant surveillance state. That's not the MO of the American nation. We shouldn't become that, but there are ways that we can use it to make us more efficient and save our human brains for the really difficult problems. So that's something that we can do. As regulated entities, I think you need to think about AI the same way you think about humans. They bring really wonderful talents to the table and skills and abilities, but there are also risks. And so think about how to bring that into your risk management program and deal with the tools that you're using. You have to understand how they work, and I think we're all working on this together, and so I think we'll be all paying attention to the benefits and the negatives.
Is the SEC actually using AI tools now?
Yeah, the SEC is using AI tools to some degree, and I think that it's something that we really, again, need to embrace even more, and thinking about ways that we can use it that make sense.
I know in the next couple of days we'll be hearing a lot about 24/5, 24/7, around-the-clock trading. Some of the equity exchanges have made proposals already. What is the Commission thinking about in terms of what risks this brings to the market, what we should be thinking about as an industry as we move in that 24/7 environment?
We certainly have 24-hour trading already, but I think the plans now are to make that much more of a real feature of the markets, and so we've greenlit that. But I think one of the things that we really do need to do is bring people together to have a conversation. I'd say do a roundtable. This is something that Commissioner Crenshaw and I called for, where we can really highlight some of the potential issues, the potential questions. Where does the SEC need to provide guidance? Where are there areas that the industry has to work on? What are the challenges people are going to face? So having that conversation, I do think it is kind of where we're going, so we all better sit down and figure out what that's going to look like.
Lastly, before we get to the audience questions, I know you've been working in Washington, as a staffer, and then also a staffer on Capitol Hill and with the SEC. Can you share some of your experiences with Washington and with this? Will things move differently or faster, or just really interested in where you're at right now?
Yeah, I mean, I have been in Washington a lot longer than I intended. So lesson number one: if you go there for a year, it sucks you in, and it's hard to leave. But I mean, that's somewhat sad in my mind, and I think it's been interesting to me to be in and around the regulatory world for a long time, and really, I've spent a lot of time thinking about what does good regulation look like, and how can we do this better. And I think some parts of society are really pushing in a bad way on regulation, right? We have a very low threshold for discomfort now in the society, and that's partly good, right? We're more prosperous, and that's a good thing. But I think one of the reasons that the capital markets work so well is because it is easy in, easy out. Right, we welcome new participants into the market to challenge the incumbents, to think about different ways of doing things. But if you mess it up, there isn't someone there to catch you. And I think that's a really important part of the system. And so really underscoring that need to keep barriers to entry low. That doesn't mean no regulation. It just means you think carefully about what the regulation should be, but also to keep barriers to exit low. And that means thinking about how do you put mechanisms in place so that you can unwind firms with in a way that is protective of customers and that's protective of the system, but does allow people to take responsibility for the mistakes they make. And so that's something that I think we really need to keep underscoring as we move forward as regulators. You all are in the business of thinking about risk and managing it, and I think we can't let regulation be the thing that serves as the insurance for everyone's bad decisions.
Great. Okay, I think we have a few minutes for questions.
And it doesn't have to be a question. Also, I'd love to hear from you if you think there are issues that the SEC should be thinking about. If you have complaints about what the SEC is doing, this is your time to air those complaints. I will take them and maybe fight back, but maybe I'll just take them.
Well, I'm going to just start with a question. I'll leave the commentary to others. I wanted to say I really like what you all are doing with the crypto task force and how you're having so many open sessions and so many ways for people to get their viewpoints into you for consideration. And I noticed in this Q&A a couple of different times you referenced the value of having a roundtable discussion. And I think that's a shift that is probably welcome to most people in this room, to have more opportunities to share the viewpoint and maybe the practicalities of that they're facing on a day-to-day basis. So I think given that many in the room come from companies that are regulated entities in some way, shape, or form, what advice would you give to the audience about how to best communicate with the agency, with you, your staff, the professional staff there?
Well, my first piece of advice is just please do that. Please come talk to us, whether that's if you're in DC, stop by and tell us what's on your minds, tell us what you think of the regulatory framework, what needs to change. And I think write comment letters, right? We put out rulemakings, the SROs filings, but you can comment on those as well. Those comment letters really do matter, and you often can provide a perspective that we just don't hear a lot of, so that's important. I've been really gratified by the willingness of people to participate in our crypto roundtables, and also we put out a request for comment that we've gotten lots of input on. There are always these kind of random responses, requests for comment. We also do have advisory committees, a small business advisory committee, an investor advisory committee. Take an opportunity to participate in those. I'm hoping at some point we'll have a compliance advisory committee as well. I will say that not all of the reception for the roundtables is positive. Yesterday I put out a notice. We're having a roundtable on Monday on tokenized securities, and I put out a notice for it on Twitter, X, and I got a response from Doge.ai. It's an automated bot, and it said, "So typical for Washington, it's all talk and no solutions. Bad job, Hester." And so anyway, they don't all like it.
I think there was a question over here, Jim.
Well, first, thank you for staying at the SEC for the past 4 years. I know it's being in a minority in DC is difficult, with being able to control the agenda and so on. I think a topic of interest for this group here would be around the consolidated audit trail, and obviously I know there was a commissioner, the acting commissioner then, you either came out with a no action letter or something around not having to report PII anymore to the CAT. This group, obviously, there's a tremendous amount of quote volume in options and updates and in quotes, and that obviously contributes to the size of the data warehouse. That obviously contributes to the cost of the warehouse. And I'd just like to get your thoughts around CAT in general. Do you think the commission is going to be re-looking at that again, reevaluating it, and in particular, is there some do we need to be reporting all this data that we question the value of it from a regulatory standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, CAT is one of the, I think, most difficult topics. We went down this road. I understand the rationale behind it, and I thought originally that this was a good plan, but I think it is not at all positive at this point. I shouldn't say not at all. I mean, obviously, there's some information that we're getting from it. You guys are spending a lot of money. We're getting some information from it that allows us as regulators to do our jobs better. But I don't think if you do a cost benefit, it comes out positively. And so what do we do now? A lot of money has been spent building this thing that someone has to pay for that. So we have to think about those issues. But we also should think about going forward, how do we deal with this? Because the costs are immense. The data storage is very expensive. And I think there are big concerns around it. It's good that we pulled out some of the PII, but I think there's still concerns around PII and confidential business information that we have to pay attention to. We had a data security amendment that had been proposed but was never finalized, so I have real concerns about the security of the information that we're pulling in. And then I think there's no break on costs, right? Because the problem is we don't pay for it at the SEC. And so, we can say, well, yeah, we want everything, and we want it faster and faster because we don't have to pay, and so it's no cost on us. And because of the way it's an NMS plan, and so, the SROs are running it, you all, many of you in the room are going to be paying the bill for it and don't really have a voice. And so I think there are just problems around governance as well. And so I guess what I hope will happen is I hope we'll take a step back, think about what we're trying to achieve with the CAT, figure out whether we need to scrap it and do something new, or whether we can pare it back to figure out what it really should be, and then figure out a sustainable way to pay for it. It's really very unfortunate that we're down this road. I mean, I think the SEC, the financial system in general has become the locus for a lot of financial surveillance in a way that I think is not great. I think it's really problematic from an American liberty and privacy perspective, and I think we also need to have a conversation just more generally around financial surveillance and whether we're comfortable with the balance there. It's costing a lot, it's very invasive of privacy. Is it actually producing the results we're hoping it is, or is there something that we could do that would be more efficient, more protective of privacy, but still achieve the very important goals behind some of that financial surveillance? So anyway, that's a long answer to say I have real concerns about the CAT.
think we have one question, probably time for one more.
Hi, Esther. My name's Bernard Goyder. I'm a journalist at Bloomberg. I wanted to ask about one of the exchanges put out a rule filing about the options regulatory fee, and this is something that's charged by all exchanges. There's been a big proliferation of options exchanges over the last few years. I think we're up at 16. There's more on the way, and part of the business model is you can charge an options regulatory fee on every single transaction done by all of the other exchanges as well. And I just wondered whether that's something you were following and whether that would be potentially an area for action by the SEC.
Well, I don't want to talk about any particular filing, but I think the point that you're bringing up is really important. So we do have a proliferation of exchanges, and I think one of the reasons for that is the way the ORF is levied, and it really sort of encourages people to start new exchanges. And so I think we ought to think about that framework. I think it's also very complicated, the way the ORF is levied and the way different exchanges do it differently. So I think it's an area that would benefit from having some SEC scrutiny to figure out, is there something that we can do to make it make more sense, frankly. And it's one example of where I think the options markets have kind of skated by without having some of the close scrutiny from the SEC on issues like that would benefit the markets. So yes, definitely open to hearing people's thoughts on that, and I'll be looking forward to having some more conversations around that topic.
Well, we really appreciate your time coming to Palm Beach Gardens. It was a great conversation. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, and enjoy the conference, enjoy the golf, and come visit me sometime in Washington or invite me to visit you. I'd love to talk with some of you individually to hear your thoughts. So thank you all.
All right, thank you.
You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available on the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions@theoptionsinsider.com.